We cannot let you bring your war here.
Outcast. That's all they see.
Meeting the Na'vi and getting to experience their lifestyle alongside Jake was a huge part of why Avatar was so successful. These mysterious blue-skinned, four-fingered humanoids who were at once more beautiful and more terrifying than anything humanity had ever encountered before. The way they treated life and communed with it, living amongst the trees and forests of the moon called Pandora, was enchanting enough. But we only explored the woods in that first film. Avatar: The Way of Water took us to the sublime oceans of Eywa's creation and introduced an entirely new race of the Na'vi, the sea-dwelling Metkayina clan. While they share the fact that they are the only sentient species capable of human functionality on the celestial body with their forest counterparts, practically nothing about the Metkayina and the Aumaticaya are the same, except the shared worship of Eywa. So without further ado, let's explore what makes these sea clans of Pandora so different from the forest clans, shall we? This is the Metkayina clan explored. But before we go to our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you, and let's begin. They follow the way of the water, the basic difference between Metkayina and Aumaticaya. The first Avatar film introduced us to the forests of Pandora and showed us the unity and the spirituality of the Aumaticaya clan of the woods. The Aumaticaya are a tribe of wood dwellers whose spiritual connection with Eywa is expressed through their connection with all things in nature. The home tree of the Aumaticaya was such an integral part of their life cycle that after the events of the first film, the clan went in search of another during the events of the Avatar comics. Their ideology seems to be rooted in the permanence of all things, as the destruction of the home tree was not just the loss of a home to the Aumaticaya, it was the loss of their history, their ancestors, and their very sense of self. The Na'vi are deeply connected to nature, for they believe all things come from Eywa and must return to her in death. But the Aumatikaya's attachment to the home tree stands in stark contrast to the Metkayina's belief in the way of the water. They share core similarities as a people, yes, but their outlook on permanence and the way one's life must flow is different. Soraya's explanation of the way of water to Loak is perhaps the best way to explain the difference between the two types of Na'vi, where the Aumaticaya base their identity and belief in the permanence of the roots of the home tree. The Metkayina believe that everything comes from and returns to the water. It is a natural part of their life cycle and is seen as a connecting force as important as their connection to Eywa. In that sense, they are much like their forest-dwelling counterparts in that their belief in their god and their ideals are very similar. But the Metkayina show a far more fluid personality, more playful, more free-flowing. That's why Jake's children face issues adjusting to life in their new home at first. Not to mention their father's marine upbringing has made discipline their first order in life. The very lifestyle of the Metkayina goes against the idea of organization, though that doesn't mean that they lack order by any means. They have organized fighting forces and even have certain coming-of-age rites that the Aumaticaya would find hard to pass despite being from the same base species. Now that we've given you a basic idea of the difference in ideology between the Aumaticaya and the Metkayina, let us get into more visibly apparent ones.
Water connects all things.
The physiological differences between the forest and sea clans of Pandora. Though both Aumaticaya and Metkayina are Na'vi, they have several evolutionary differences which have allowed them to adapt to their permanent areas of settlement. In the case of the former, that would be the forests of Pandora, where one requires the strength and nimbleness of a great ape to survive through the vines and viper wolves of the woods. In the case of the Metkayina, water informs not just their cultural traditions, but also their very physiology. The sea clans of Pandora are structurally and functionally similar to the forest clans, yet on a personal level they are completely different. For starters, the skin of the Metkayina is far lighter than the deep blue shade that Jake, Neytiri, and their children have. This cyan-green color reflects the shades of the oceans of Pandora and must have come about as a means of camouflaging the Metkayina in case predators approach them in the water. Their hands and feet aren't quite as graceful as those of the Aumaticaya, for they have evolved to include fin-like protrusions fins that aid them in swimming through deep waters. The same goes for their tail, which looks like more of a whip than an actual tail and works as a propeller, guiding and helping them pick up the pace whenever they need to. If the Omaticaya spend their hours traversing the trees of Pandora, then the Metkayina spend an equal amount of time underwater exploring the depths of its seas. They're able to do this because they possess a larger chest cavity than most other Na'vi we've seen so far, which seems to imply that they can retain air far longer than is considered normal. It is possible for forest Na'vi to also learn how to spend long hours underwater by learning how to breathe from their gut and also learning effective breath control, the kind that Sereia teaches to the Sully family, but it takes time and practice. And even after learning how to control their breath for long periods of time underwater, the Sullys can never truly catch up to the Metkayina in terms of visual prowess underwater, for they lack the third eyelid of those people. Metkayina have a nictating membrane that activates when they are underwater, shielding their eyes from permanent damage while allowing them to practically live underwater. And speaking of their eyes, those are perhaps the biggest difference between the two types of Na'vi we've seen so far. The Omaticaya have bright yellow eyes like those of a feline predator, but the Metkayina have soothing sea green eyes like the very oceans they live in. They also tie their hair in loose curls, unlike the thick braids of the forest people, which helps them stave off predators of the sea, and the stripes on their bodies look more like the ones Terran fishes possess, unlike the Omaticaya, who are striped like tigers. So if you think about it, the Metkayina are practically a divergent species of the Na'vi, for their very biology works so differently from those Na'vi who live in the forests. But that isn't where the differences end. The sea clans of Pandora are the only shown Na'vi who practice the art of tattooing, and that's because their main inspiration behind them is the Maori culture. Tattooing is sacred to the Maori people, and each tattoo has a personal, communal, spiritual, and ancestral significance. The placement of tattoos and the number of tattoos one has can often indicate their status in their community, and tribe leaders are often recognized by their elaborate face tattoos. This idea has been carried over by the Metkayina as well, whose tattoos are seen as a sign of their place in the tribe and also as a gift from Ewa herself. Tonowari, the Olo'eiktan of the Metkayina, has elaborate face tattoos that cement his position as the head of the clan, but that isn't it. Each tattooed limb signifies that Metkayina's place and role in the community. Most Sea Clan members will be seen with a tattoo on their torso over their heart to signify the closeness they share with their central home, but other parts of the body are tattooed to show what purpose they serve within the clan itself. Hunters who travel beyond the seawall terraces and gather prey from the waters beyond the community's borders often have heavily tattooed arms and next to nothing on their chests, which signifies the fact that their job description requires them to stay away from their central home and be closer to the edges of the world. Thus, tattoos are seen as an identity marker and as a blessing from Ewa, who imbues that particular Na'vi with their sense of purpose through it. And this isn't the only thing that sets the Metkayina apart from their forest-dwelling counterparts.
So what does her heartbeat sound like?
Tahelu and the Tulkun Way. It appears as though the basic structure of life is the same for all sentient Na'vi beings on Pandora. For the Metkayina, like the Omaticaya, live in large villages with thousands of years of history, have rich oral traditions, and promote the same community spirit that the forest dwellers of their kind do. They too have an Olo'eiktan and a Sahik, the two-part leadership structure we were introduced to in Avatar 1, and Ewa is a central part of their faith. But in everything else, they could not be more different from the Omaticaya clan. The Metkayina live and survive off of the waters of Pandora, and so their steeds and sprites all come from the oceans. All Metkayina learn how to ride an ilu at a young age, the aquatic equivalent of the dire horse from mainland Pandora. Metkayina children learn how to ride an ilu at quite a young age, but that doesn't mean everyone can ride these adorable creatures. Loak in particular had a tough time mastering an ilu because, as you might have guessed already, the ilus tend to dive the paddle quite forcefully, which is something the forest Na'vi boy is clearly not used to. Once he does become familiar with that feeling, Loak has a far easier time riding an ilu, just like his father did with the dire horse Pale. But riding an ilu and riding a skimwing are two entirely different beasts, which is evidenced by the difficulty Jake, who was Turok Makto, has with learning how to tame one. Skimwings are suspected to be a genetic offshoot of Ikran, given the similarities they share in terms of appearance, physiology, and even the number of wings. But there are two crucial differences between an Ikran and a skimwing. 1. Skim wings don't exactly fly. They use their wings to keep themselves above water whilst propelling themselves with their paddle-like tails. And 2. The bond between a rider and a skim wing doesn't seem to last for life. The Sahelu between an Ikran and a Navi was a big part of how Jake Sully came to understand what it meant to be Omaticaya in the first place, and Ceza's death hit us just as bad as Grace's in the first film, but it appears as though that lifelong bonding is reserved for another creature in the Way of Water, because nowhere was it mentioned that once a skim wing is bonded to a Metkayina, that bond stays for life. Learning how to ride a skim wing is part of their Iknimaya, though, and just how a forest Navi failing to tame an Ikran is a sign that they are not ready to become a man yet. So it is with Metkayina and skim wings. As the mount of a warrior, it is an important rite of passage for those who wish to fight for their clan, but perhaps the most important creature in the Metkayina cycle of life is the Tulkun. Tulkuns are whale-like creatures who inhabit the waters of Pandora and are the only other sentient species to have been documented living on the moon. Tulkuns have their own language, music, mathematics, and entire society based off of the passive living and sharing a spiritual connection with a Metkayina, because every Tulkun is a spirit brother or sister to a member of the clan, and their bond goes deeper than that of an Omaticaya and an Ikran. The Metkayina have developed a special kind of sign language that allows them to communicate with their spirit siblings, and bonding with a Tulkun is a sure sign of being accepted by the Way of the Water, which was the case between Loak and Payakan. Outsiders both after a fashion, Loak and Payakan bonded with one another after the latter saved the former from a predatory attack. This prompted Saraya to exclaim that he was truly one of ours now, because bonding with a Tulkun is the highest spiritual duty of a Metkayina, second only to the worship of Ewa. The reason why Payakan was considered an outcast was because he went against the Tulkun way, which is a doctrine of pacifism adopted by the Tulkun and, by extension, the spirit siblings. During the days of the first songs, the Tulkun were much like other animals, and that way too were feral by nature. Despite being sentient and having the sense to avoid warfare, the Tulkun used to welcome it, to the extent that one day, horrified by their actions, they decided to outlaw killing of any kind, even if it was justified. Payakan was a Tulkun who defied this ancient edict and tried to attack an RDA whaling vessel, which claimed his mother's life, getting his entire party killed in the process. Loak, who understood Payakan's pain and had some sense of retaliation given his half-human heritage, was able to empathize with him to a level where they became bonded for life. The Sahelu between a Tulkun and a Navi goes beyond that between them and an Ikran, and is almost the same as the connection they make at spirit tree locations, where the Navi can access the Pandora neural network and even talk to their god Ewa. Thus, the killing of a Tulkun who has been bonded with a Metkayina can cause them immense grief, as was seen with Ronal, who lost her spirit sister Roa to Quaritch's quest for revenge. The Tulkun way is apparently amended after the RDA's whaling units attacked Awa-Atlu, because the Metkayina fought back hard against the invaders, and Payakan is crucial to the survival of Jake and his family. But we will learn more about that in Avatar 3, where the Metkayina are set to return and have an even bigger role if reports are to be believed. The last thing we want to address in this video is the Cove of the Ancestors, which functions much like the Tree of Souls from Avatar 1. The Omaticaya are a forest-dwelling people, and the largest neural connection to Ewa lied high up high in the Hallelujah Mountains, so it only makes sense that the Metkayina's spiritual hotline to Ewa lie under the sea. The Cove of the Ancestors is a beautiful underwater location where the Metkayina gather for clan rituals of immense importance, like the birth of a babe, the rite of passage of a boy to a man, or the death of a man in the field of battle. It is that last instance where we see the Cove in its full glory, as the Metkayina bury Neteyam according to their customs and accept the Sully family as true Metkayina. This underwater location also suggests, however, that wherever the Navi gather to settle, portals of spirituality rise up to connect them to their creator and great mother. It will be interesting to see where else they pop up, as there were talk of an Ash people showing up in Avatar 3, but for now, this will have to do so far as the Metkayina are concerned.
The Way of Water connects all things. Before your birth,
Marvelous verdict. The Way of Water was a visual experience like no other, and a large part of why it worked were the Metkayina themselves. They are at once a diminished and heightened portrayal of the Omaticaya, diminished in their sense of permanence and heightened in their sense of spirituality and free-flowing connection with all things in Eywa's oceans. They are a fierce people marked by their intense independence, whose spirit bonds with the Tulkun are second only to their bonds with Eywa. Avatar: The Way of Water has only scratched the surface when it comes to truly knowing the Metkayina people, for Avatar 3 will be going deeper into the blue-green depths of Pandora's oceans and exploring the diverse life forms on James Cameron's masterful creation even more. And to be honest with you guys, 2024 can't come fast enough for us. The Way of Water is endless, and we have been swept up by its current thanks to these green-eyed and skinned Na'vi seafarers. If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone.
I need you with me. And I need you to be strong.